Gobekli Tepe, the first temple in history. What would you think if I told you that the oldest temple in the world was built before agriculture, cities, and the wheel? Long before the pyramids of Egypt, even before humans knew how to grow wheat, people were carving massive stone columns and erecting monumental structures to worship gods that we don't even know today. That place exists, and it's called Gobekli Tepe. Discovered almost by accident on a Turkish hill in 1994, this archaeological site is completely changing what we thought we knew about the origin of civilization. What if it wasn't farms that made us sedentary, but temples? Get ready to travel back 11,600 years and learn about the first temple in human history and the mystery of those who built it. Imagine going back more than 11,000 years. There were no cities, agriculture, or writing. Humanity was still hunting and gathering, and building a temple seemed unimaginable. Gobekli Tepe is an archaeological site in southeastern Turkey, in the Anatolia region, near Şanlıurfa, also known as Urfa. Its name means Potbelly Hill in Turkish, and although it may sound funny, it hides one of humanity's most fascinating secrets. The site was discovered in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute, although an American expedition had already recorded the mounds decades earlier. However, everyone thought they were medieval tombs, until Schmidt saw the stone carvings and realized this was extraordinary. The surprising thing is that Gobekli Tepe dates back to approximately 9,600 BC, which makes it the oldest known temple of humanity, even before writing, which appeared about 6,000 years later, and the first cities of Mesopotamia. It was built during the Neolithic pre-ceramic period A, when humanity was just beginning to abandon nomadism. And to which civilization does it belong? Here comes the mysterious part. It does not belong to any known civilization. It was built by groups of hunter-gatherers long before empires and city-states were formed. They left no writings, and we do not know their language or names. The site consists of several circular enclosures with massive T-shaped pillars up to 5.5 meters or 18 feet high and weighing more than 15 tons, arranged in circular patterns reminiscent of a temple or ceremonial center. Many are decorated with reliefs of animals: lions, wild boars, snakes, vultures, and scorpions. It is a deeply symbolic and deliberately constructed place. But why? For what? These questions are the starting point for one of the greatest mysteries of modern archaeology. Gobekli Tepe is so old that its existence defies everything we thought we knew about how civilization began. Traditionally, archaeologists thought that organized religion arose after agriculture and sedentary living. First we sow the wheat, build cities, and then temples. But here, the opposite happens. We build temples before we even learn to cultivate. The T-shaped pillars of Gobekli Tepe are not just decorative columns. Many have hand-carved reliefs with scenes of aggressive animals, tigers, wild boars, snakes, and abstract symbols suspected of having ritual or mythological significance. Some researchers believe these pillars represent stylized human figures, and the temple was a sacred space, possibly intended for initiation rituals, sacrifices, or spiritual connection with the divine. So, who built it? Everything indicates that they were the hunter-gatherer groups that inhabited the Anatolian region more than 11 millennia ago. They still lacked pottery, domesticated animals, or stable villages. However, they organized the monumental effort of carving, transporting, and erecting stone blocks weighing more than 15 tons without wheels or pack animals. It is believed that coordinated teams of at least 500 people were required to move and place the larger pillars. Did they meet there a few times a year, or did they live nearby? It is not yet known. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, in the Americas, human groups were just beginning to settle, as in the case of Caral in Peru, which would not be built until more than 6,000 years later. In Europe, our ancestors still lived in caves or temporary camps, using stone and bold tools. In East Asia, it was still centuries before the cultures of the Yellow River Valley emerged. Gobekli Tepe is like a temporal anomaly, a construction so advanced and extensive at a time when no one thought there was the capacity to do it. This raises an interesting question. What if religion was not a consequence of civilization, but its cause? One of the most revolutionary ideas that Gobekli Tepe has introduced is that religion could have been the spark that ignited sedentarization, rather than the other way around. For decades, it was thought that humanity first domesticated plants and animals, became sedentary, and then, with more free time, religion and monumental architecture emerged. But Gobekli Tepe seems to indicate that this was the other way around. Think about it. If a group of people needed to return from time to time to a sacred place to celebrate rituals, gather or bury their dead, some stability was necessary. This involved building durable structures and planning the logistics of food and materials, eventually leading to settling nearby. Gobekli Tepe could be the reason these groups started farming the land and domesticating animals, not out of convenience, but out of necessity. Although no permanent dwellings have been found at this site, there is evidence that large groups were involved in its construction. It is estimated that at least 300 to 500 people would have been needed to erect the pillars. How did they do it? In the absence of wheels or pack animals, they likely used sleds, wooden rollers and ramps, and even ropes braided with vegetable fibers. Also with stone tools such as flint pickaxes and brute force. The primary material is local limestone, which is relatively easy to carve. Still, it is surprising that these supposedly primitive groups designed symmetrical structures with specific alignments and architectural planning. Some researchers have noted astronomical orientations in specific pillars, suggesting a surprising knowledge of the sky. Gobekli Tepe does not seem to have been a place of daily residence, but a ritual or ceremonial center that attracted people from many religions. They probably met there at certain times of the year to celebrate, trade, or worship. These periodic meetings could have been the seed of the first organized communities. So, is it possible that the need to gather around the sacred place created the first sense of home? Perhaps Gobekli Tepe was not built because we were already sedentary, but we became sedentary to build Gobekli Tepe. How could a civilization capable of carving 15-ton columns, organizing hundreds of people and building structures that lasted more than 11,000 years, disappear without leaving a trace? That is the central mystery of Gobekli Tepe. After centuries of ceremonial use, something happened. Around 8,200 BC, Gobekli Tepe was purposely buried. We're not talking about natural abandonment, as often with old sites. Here, archaeologists have found evidence that the pillars and enclosures were carefully covered with earth, rubble, and fragments of tools. It was as if the builders themselves decided to seal the place. But why? There are several theories. One suggests that rituals lost their meaning as communities evolved. The domestication of animals such as goats and sheep and the cultivation of wild wheat in nearby areas such as Karajadag would have changed these people's priorities. New ceremonial centers or organization forms may have replaced Gobekli Tepe. Another theory points to the weather. Around 8,200 BC, an abrupt climatic event known as Event 8.2 occurred, a mini glaciation that caused a global temperature drop. This change would have affected the availability of resources and forced populations to migrate or reorganized. Could this have caused Gobekli Tepe to lose its importance? The truth is that after this burial, the place fell into oblivion. The people who built it left no writing, names, or stories. Did it influence later cultures? It's hard to know for sure, but some archaeologists believe that the concept of the central temple, of the symbolic axis connecting heaven and earth, may have been inherited by later Neolithic peoples in Çatalhöyük, Nivalachuri, and later by the Temple of Mesopotamia. However, there is no clear evidence of cultural continuity between them and the later civilizations of the region, such as the Hittites, Hudians, or Assyrians. Gobekli Tepe remained underground for more than 11,000 years until Klaus Schmidt rediscovered it in 1994. Gobekli Tepe is like a page torn from a history book we didn't even know existed. Far from closing a chapter, its abandonment opens up questions that still make us scratch our heads today. Why bury it? Was closing it a ritual, a goodbye, or an attempt to preserve something sacred? Those are questions that, for now, do not have a clear answer. Until recently, history books taught us that civilization began with agriculture, then came cities, and finally organized religion. It was an orderly, almost mathematical sequence, but Gobekli Tepe burst forth like an out-of-place fossil. an enigma that challenges our narrative about the origins of modern humans. This site is so important because it proves that complex social organization, large-scale cooperation, and religious ideas existed thousands of years earlier than we thought possible. And all that without established agriculture, cities, and writing forces us to rewrite our understanding of the Neolithic period. The builders of Gobekli Tepe were not quiet villagers with wheat fields and domesticated cattle. They were hunter-gatherers who, against all odds, devised a system that required planning, hierarchy, architectural knowledge, and perhaps even a ritual calendar. This implies that human beings' symbolic, spiritual, and organizational capacity arose long before the first large cities. In addition, Gobekli Tepe is the oldest monumental site ever discovered. At more than 11,500 years old, it predates Stonehenge by more than 6,000 years, and the pyramids of Egypt by more than 7,000. Not only is it older, it is also more complex than many later sites. Their discovery also raises a provocative question. If a large temple remained buried for over 11,000 years, how many others could be waiting in silence? Gobekli Tepe connects us to an ancient, mysterious, yet intensely creative and spiritual humanity. It reminds us that even without modern technology, our ancestors already felt the need to seek the transcendent, to come together, to build something that would unite them and give them meaning. In a world that often seeks answers to the future, Gobekli Tepe invites us to look back, not to stay in the past, but to understand where we came from and, perhaps, where we could go. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.